Revealed, the surprising moment the rancher transformed everything in just 30 seconds, Joe Harris stood on the porch of his family's ranch, feeling the weight of the evening sun dipping below the horizon. Each shadow cast by the fence posts felt like a ghost of his past, whispering secrets of better days. The rustling wind carried the scent of dry earth and sweat, but now it brought with it rumors that left a bitter taste in his mouth, whispers of debt spiraling, community respect diminishing. His heart raced as he recalled overhearing the local grocer mutter, "Joe's losing it." A once respected rancher, now just a forgotten name. His fists clenched at his sides, the mere thought ignited a fierce impulse to scream into the void. Just yesterday, Mike Reynolds sauntered back into town, his firm voice echoing memories of mentorship. "You can't cling to the past, Joe," he scolded as they stood among the rusting equipment. "The world is changing. You need to change too." Those words rattled Joe's foundations like an earthquake. Change was terrifying, an upheaval of everything that he had built with his own two hands, everything his father and grandfather had sacrificed for. He felt the tremors of uncertainty rumbling beneath him, threatening to swallow the ground he cherished. As dusk settled, the conversations with his children turned heavier, tinged with a concern that twisted in his gut. They were young, bright-eyed dreamers, carrying a future that he desperately wanted to mold. Yet, would they follow in his footsteps, stubbornly tethered to a land that seemed to be slipping through his fingers? The fear of inadequacy clawed at him, the possibility that he might not have the wisdom to lead them through a storm of inevitable change wound tighter and tighter around his chest. Sitting alone in the barn's quiet embrace, the familiar scents of leather and hay surrounded him like a warm hug. A glimmer of an unexpected inheritance surfaced, one hidden deep within the family lineage. It could be the catalyst he needed to revive the ranch, a bold direction that promised prosperity. But was it worth sacrificing the very traditions he held dear? That question loomed larger than the Texas sky, weighing heavily upon him. What if stepping toward a brighter future meant abandoning the past's lessons? The thought twisted like a knife in his heart, igniting the battle lines in his mind. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just then, the sound of a neighing horse jolted him from his spiraling thoughts. In that moment, the faces of his children flashed before his eyes, full of faith, hope, and a desire for belonging. The tension inside him spiked. Life as he knew it felt poised on a team of wild horses, ready to bolt. With his heart thumping steadily in irregular rhythm, Joe realized he stood on the cusp of a choice that could reshape their legacy. In the flicker of a heartbeat, he felt the daunting pressure of his dreams entwined with uncertainty. Would he play it safe, anchored to fading traditions, or take a leap into an uncharted direction? The sun sank lower, the shadows deepening, as he grasped the railing, his mind raging and his resolve faltering. With breaths like thunder, he stood at a critical moment, aware that the choice he was about to make would echo through the generations, for better or worse. The clock was ticking, and with each second, the tension crescendoed, confronting him with an unbearable truth that could change everything. The next morning arrived heavy with consequence, the sun spilling over the horizon like morning coffee, potent yet bittersweet. Joe stood at the barn door, wrestling the weight of his thoughts. The sunrise painted the world gold, yet the warmth did little to thaw the chill that clung to his resolve. He had spent all night mulling over his inheritance, uncovering the glimmer of possibility that whispered for attention, an innovative method to raise livestock that his great-grandfather had first experimented with, now reinvented by contemporary understanding. But could he align this new technique with his old-school values? The question hovered around him like a specter, a reminder of all he had to lose. The legacy of hard work etched into the landscape with each bootprint possessed a gravity he couldn't shake off. Could innovation really coexist with tradition? Was he strong enough to merge the two worlds? His children emerged, breakfast plates in hand, and they brought a goofy lightness not burdened by the weight of adult worries. As they laughed and teased one another, Joe felt a flicker of hope, a reminder that their futures hung in the balance of his decisions. They spoke of their dreams, and he found himself listening with a mix of fear and pride. They wanted to travel, to own businesses, to explore the world outside their ranch life. "I want to be a vet," his daughter Tanya declared, blue eyes glimmering with the intensity of her passion. "I'm gonna be the best rancher there ever was," added his son Sam, a youthful fire evident in his voice. The gravity of their ambitions struck him anew like a lightning bolt. They held possibilities he had never dared to dream about. Did he want to suffocate their ambitions under the weight of tradition? The thought sent tremors of guilt coursing through him. He hadn't been the only one raised with foreboding and duty. There was space to incorporate dreams, to integrate growth into their lives. After finally breaking his fast with the kids, he found solace in a rare moment of stillness. Memories of long, tangled debates with Mike whirled like leaves caught in a brisk gust. Each conversation had centered not just on the ranch but on approaches to life itself. Mike's voice echoed in his mind, "Adapt or die, Joe." Those words propelled his thoughts that he knew he needed to embrace change, not as an abandonment of legacy but as an extension of it. To breathe life into that legacy, to spotlight what it meant to evolve. He pictured a vibrant future, gardens of livestock flourishing under a new methodology, the children rallying behind him as he broke ground on a novel approach. With that vision crystallizing in his mind, his heart coalesced into a single thought: if he were to act, it was time for action to follow inspiration. He would pair his ancestral wisdom with the innovative methods buried in his family history. But this leap was terrifying. It demanded vulnerability, risk, and a willingness to face possible failure. Fueled by determination, he began making a plan. Books to read, research to pursue, perhaps even an agricultural consulting group to join or a workshop to attend. The realization that he had choices sparked a fire within him. The previous night's despair shifted into an exhilarating mix with hope, laying the groundwork for something promising. Yet, even as he organized ideas, a gnawing doubt lurked: would they, the community, embrace this transformation? What disdain might linger in the eyes of those who revered the traditions he was contemplating? The fear lingered like a shadow behind his bold ambitions, as heavy as the ranch's history itself, and just as his thoughts began to settle, the barn door creaked open behind him, revealing the silhouette of Mike. The tension surged anew. Joe was suddenly aware this conversation was inevitable. The time had come to face him once more and unveil his new strategy and confront the reality that, like change, the unexpected could be just around the corner. Mike stepped into the warm light of the barn, the familiar scent of hay and livestock enveloping him as he approached. His stature seemed larger than Joe remembered, the weight of their history pressing down like a summer storm cloud. He squinted against the brightness, and for a moment, the two men simply stood there, caught in a web of unspoken words. "Joe," Mike began, his voice steady but laced with an urgency that crackled in the air. "I heard some whispers about you looking into those new techniques. Are you really thinking about it?" Joe took a deep breath, every fiber of his being poised for confrontation. He could feel the echoes of their prior debates thrumming in his chest, the echo of conflict that had always existed between tradition and progress. This was the moment to open up, to lay bare his thoughts. "Yeah, I am," Joe finally replied, the tremor in his voice revealing the tension coursing through him. "I want to know what more we can do here, Mike. I want to blend what I learned growing up with modern practices. I can't let the past suffocate our future." Mike's expression shifted subtly, a blend of curiosity and skepticism tracing his features. "But Joe, you're talking about turning the whole thing upside down. What if it doesn't work? Your dad's worked hard to keep this place running." "I'm not abandoning anything," Joe said, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I'm embracing it. If I can raise livestock in a way that respects our legacy and improves it, why wouldn't I try?" He watched as Mike's eyebrows knitted together, calculating and weighing. Joe saw the familiar gears turning. This was the same Mike who had taken proactive risks with his own business, yet here he was, caught in disbelief. "People around here don't like change, Joe. They're passionate about tradition, just like us. Mike leaned against the barn wall, arms crossed, a protective barrier between them. What do you think they'll say? But what if we don't give them a choice? Joe challenged, feeling a surge of confidence. Wouldn't it be better to introduce them to the possibility of what we could achieve together, instead of shying away from it? Silence hung heavily, stretching between them. In that moment, Joe recognized something vital in himself, his ability to stand firm in his convictions. The doubts that had plagued him began to recede, replaced by a growing conviction, but beneath the surface of his newfound clarity was a chilling realization his community would be just as reluctant to adapt as Mike. Years of tradition had laid their roots deep, and Joe was digging around without fully understanding how to navigate the soil. As he began to mentally prepare his outline of the plan, he felt an impending urgency. Time was of the essence, he needed to start small, engage the community. Mike had said it himself, people needed that connection to what they understood before they could be led into something unknown. "I'll host a meeting," Joe declared, his heart racing. "A community gathering at the barn. We'll talk about the methods, let people ask questions. I want them involved. What if they push back?" Mike asked, skepticism woven in his tone. "Then I'll listen. We can't expect transformation without dialogue." Joe felt a flicker of defiance, a spark taking hold. Suddenly, thoughts coalesced. Could this actually be the moment he had been waiting for, the confrontation that would lead to action? He would present not only his vision but invite others to contribute. Their legacy didn't belong to him alone, with their support, he could introduce gradual change. "Okay," Mike said at last, his voice softer but still concerned. "If you feel strongly about this, I support you. But you better be ready for the fallout." With that, as they settled back into the familiar rhythm of their partnership, Joe could feel the pulse of transition quickening between them. The barn, that hallowed space, seemed to vibrate with potential. Yet just as hope began to bloom in his chest, the familiar sound of a distant truck engine caught both their attentions. A glimpse of passing headlights streaked through the barn's windows, reminder that this moment of clarity could be overshadowed at any moment by unforeseen consequences, the community arriving either for support or to question everything he hoped to build. As that uncertainty loomed before him, Joe knew the reality, change was coming, whether he was ready or not. The barn's newfound brightness seemed to dim ever so slightly under the weight of what lay ahead. But what he didn't know about this new endeavor, the reactions it would stir, and the battles he would face were just beginning to unfurl. As the truck's engine faded into the distance, Joe felt a knot twist in his stomach. The anticipation of uncertainty gripped him with icy fingers. He could already picture the faces of friends and neighbors, their brows furrowed in skepticism, their voices echoing the doubts that ran through his mind. Could he really bridge the divide between tradition and innovation without tearing apart the ties that bound him to his community? Determined, he shook off the weight of doubt and turned to Mike, who remained watchful, arms crossed tightly against his chest. "Let us make a start on the outline for that meeting," Joe suggested, his voice stronger than he felt. He saw a flicker of support in Mike's eyes but also the lingering concern that they were standing on the precipice of something monumental. They settled into the rhythm of brainstorming, Joe jotting down buzzwords that reflected his vision: sustainability, community engagement, modern techniques, historical respect. As he wrote, the words felt more than just written ideas, they were forming the foundation of a potential legacy. Yet with each stroke of the pen, a new shadow loomed. Would these concepts resonate, or would they fall flat against the echoes of past traditions? "Joe," Mike interrupted his thoughts, a hint of worry edging his tone. "What if this sparks arguments? People won't take it lightly, especially if we're challenging the way things have always been done." "Then let them argue." Joe felt a swell of defiance. "It'll only mean they care. I want them to engage, to feel that they have a stake in this. But I can't do that hiding in the background. I have to lay it bare." The realization that hit him was tantalizing. This was his opportunity to evolve not just as a rancher, but as a leader. As the outline grew more defined, Joe found himself captivated by the possibilities. He envisioned the meeting not as a confrontation but as a dialogue. A place where questions could be voiced, and solutions explored collaboratively. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, but rather than buckle, he embraced it. Each idea he penned seemed less like risk and more like duty. "I can't shake the feeling that they will see this as a betrayal," Mike said quietly after a pause, almost as if to himself. "Your dad worked hard for what we have. This isn't simple, Joe." "I know," Joe murmured, his confidence wavering for a flicker of a moment. His father's legacy was woven into the very fabric of the barn they stood in, and the thought of jeopardizing it brought forth an irrational fear. But as he looked around, he remembered the animals awaiting care, the crops yearning for better methods. "But what good is honoring a legacy if it stagnates us? Just because it's been done that way doesn't mean it's the right way forever." The weight shifted slightly. Mike's shoulders relaxed marginally as he considered Joe's point, and Joe felt a surge of hope that they could meet halfway. They were both protectors of their land, yet the way they viewed that protection diverged. The fact remained that Joe was willing to extend an olive branch towards change, but with the risks ahead, he had to be prepared for resistance. As they finalized plans, Joe made a mental note: he'd share what he had learned, demonstrate the benefits, and hopefully, win over hearts with logic. But would it be enough? The delicate play of tradition against evolution loomed large, and he felt acutely aware that he would bear the brunt of the community's reaction. "Joe." Mike hesitated, his voice low. "If this doesn't go well, will you still think it's worth it? Will you still stand by your vision?" The question echoed like a distant thunderclap. Joe paused, considering his own conviction. "I have to take that chance," he said finally. "But I'll make sure I do it with respect and honesty. That's the only way to honor where we come from and where we want to go." The seeds of transformation were planted, but the landscape ahead remained uncertain and tumultuous. As they wrapped up, Joe felt the gravity of the task ahead settle over him. He needed to communicate his vision clearly, but also navigate the suspicious waters of his neighbor's beliefs. And as he stepped onto the threshold of possibility, an unshakable awareness took root: he wasn't just changing practices, he was about to alter perceptions. The meeting would be his stage, but would he leave it emboldened or broken? Just then, the familiar truck engine rumbled back into earshot, a harbinger of the moment that was drawing near. The time had come to face what had always simmered beneath the surface: opposition and affirmation tangled together in an unyielding knot. But as Joe stood resolute, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the brink of revealing something far greater than himself. The next morning brought with it a thin blanket of fog that lay over the ranch, an uncharacteristic stillness settling in the air, accentuating the pulse of his anxiety. Joe stood outside the barn, leaning against the weathered wood, bracing himself against the unknown. He could almost hear the whispers of doubt, and they twisted around him like vines reaching for sunlight. He glanced at the horizon, where the sun gradually began to break through the haze, casting warm light across the fields. This wasn't just another day, it felt like a crossroad. A directionless sense of urgency ignited in him a need to act, to transform his ideas into substantive reality. Yet, beneath that drive lay an unsettling awareness: he was standing at the frontier between his past, represented by his father's legacy, and an uncertain future that he felt beckoning to him. "Look, you've got this," he muttered to himself, determination clashing with self-doubt. The ranch had always been about resilience, and he had inherited that much from his father, even if the ways of the world had subtly shifted beneath his feet. As he walked towards the meeting spot, he clutched the outline he and Mike had worked on the day before, the paper warm from the touch of his hand. This was more than an agenda, it was a declaration, an embodiment of principles that could redefine their way of life. With each step, he replayed the words in his mind: sustainability, engagement, innovation. Yet beneath them all, a lingering fear whispered: would these ideas be enough? The murmurs of the townsfolk echoed in his mind, their skepticism wrapping around him like a thick fog. What's wrong with how things are? Why mess with tradition? He could picture their faces, familiar, yet foreign in their incredulity. Their questions were valid, but they weren't all he held in his heart. Upon arriving at the meeting spot, Joe inhaled deeply, feeling the crisp aroma of the earth mixed with anticipation. He arranged the chairs, creating a semblance of openness, a tangible representation of his desire for dialogue rather than division. The faces that began to gather were a blend of curiosity and apprehension, and he struggled to focus his thoughts. "Joe!" called out Helen, a local farmer known for her no-nonsense attitude. "Hope you're not about to propose something too radical for us." Her tone was teasing, but he could sense the challenge hidden within it. He felt the weight of her challenge, an embodiment of all that spoke against him. "That's exactly what I'm hoping for," he replied, surprising even himself. "I'm here to discuss how we can make our ranch practices more sustainable, to modernize while still respecting the work that has come before us." Heads nodded, but some brow furrowed deeper, eyes narrowing in concern. Joe's heart raced, fully aware that this was a defining moment. Each person here represented a life woven into the collective fabric of a community he admired but now found himself poised against. "What do you mean?" someone interrupted, their voice sharp. "Are you saying our ways are outdated?" Joe felt the gut punch of that inquiry, steeling himself against the truth shrouded in traditions he too cherished. Yet he had to stand firm, show them that evolution didn't equate to erasure. It represented respect. Growth meant using modern knowledge while cherishing their rich heritage. "I'm saying we need to evolve our practices to meet today's challenges," he replied, grounding his voice with conviction. "Can we afford to stay stagnant in a world that's changing every day?" The room tightened with every heartbeat, tension coiling around Joe like a snake preparing to strike. He could see dissent flicker in faces, but he also saw the budding realization that he was offering them not a rejection of the past, but a continuity of their values reinterpreted for an era in disarray. With that, he rolled into the bold foray of his vision. There were risks, yes, but sometimes it took a single moment, a single courageous voice to start a transformative movement. The next words out of his mouth could either unravel everything he was trying to build or weave a new bond of understanding. "Let's talk this through," he said, no longer just an idea bouncing around his mind but a clear resolution. "Let's challenge our own traditions together and see where we can go." The room hung on his offer, a collective breath waiting to be released. In that fleeting moment, he felt the quiet truth settle within him. He wasn't just changing methods, he was wrestling with perceptions, and this could either be the beginning of aligned visions or create a rift too wide to cross. Yet it was his willingness to face that uncertainty that edged him closer to the essence of leadership. Would it galvanize support or draw ire? As the discussion erupted around him, Joe sensed that the precipice was not just between yesterday and tomorrow, it was also about the courage within himself to embrace the unknown, surrender to the flow of conversation, and allow change to unfold. And in that swirling chaos, he felt something new ignite in his chest, the thrill of possibility, tinged with fear. His evolution as both an agent of change and a protector of his community's legacy was just beginning. But as opposing voices began to rise, Joe couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenge was still yet to come. The murmur of conversation faded into a tense silence as Joe prepared for the next chapter of his pitch. The room felt both intimate and threatening, a collection of familiar faces that now seemed to float in a sea of uncertainty. He could feel the skepticism wrap around him tighter, but there was also a flicker of intrigue, a shared curiosity about what might lie beyond tradition's safety net. That he glanced around the room, unlocking the potential he sensed hidden in their collective hesitation. "What if I told you that the future holds opportunities we haven't even imagined yet? What if adapting our methods could not only sustain our ranching legacy but also set a new standard for excellence?" A ripple of disbelief surged through the crowd, met with some glimmers of hope. Helen's brows raised in question. "Are you suggesting we overhaul everything we've built?" "No," he countered quickly, feeling the risk in the air. "I'm suggesting we reimagine it. Together." With every word, Joe fought the urge to collapse under the weight of expectation. This moment could either validate the years he had spent cultivating these thoughts or expose him to their derision. His heart raced as he recalled the fundamental truths his father had forged into him. Bravery was not the absence of fear, it was action in spite of it. "Let's consider something simple," Joe continued, adjusting the notes in his hand to anchor himself. Our irrigation practices. We use a lot of water more than we need. Have you considered investing in rainwater harvesting? It could minimize costs and even improve crop yields. Distracted murmurs flowed like echoes through the crowd, dissolving the rigid tension that had been there moments before. Voices carried ideas that crackled with energy, and for the first time, he heard someone say, "I've read about it. It works." Yes, it does. Joe's response lit a spark within him. Turning that initial wave of skepticism into genuine conversation fueled him. It was becoming palpable, the connection between their past and the doors he imagined them opening. "Can I share a personal experience?" He was met with nods, and he leaned in, revealing a side of himself he had long kept guarded. "The other day, I saw my son try to understand my work. He sat on the tractor, pretending to drive while I worked the fields, and I realized something: if we don't adapt, what legacy will he inherit?" Here, he felt the force of vulnerability wash over him, exposing a tender truth about his own fears and hopes. His confession broke something in the room. Old habits of resistance began to crack under the weight of shared experience. The older farmers traced their pasts in the air between them, memories mingling with aspirations. "But change is daunting," Joe said, sensing the narrative shift. "There's uncertainty in it, and I know you feel that." Genuine concern flickered on the faces before him. "But we can be the stewards of our future. We've lost touch with adapting practices that have proven successful in other regions. Why not be the first to pioneer change here and make a mark?" A short silence followed, each individual weighing Joe's words. Awakening a desire for progress within them, he leveraged that moment by posing an unexpected question: "What if I committed to championing this shift? Would you be willing to try?" Breathlessly awaiting their response, he felt his heart beat in time with the uncertainty in the air. Then, unexpectedly, a voice from the back spoke up: "If you'll lead, I'll follow." Joe locked eyes with the speaker, a local rancher known for his staunch traditionalism. The ripple effect of his words crashed through the room, spurring others to share their thoughts. It was like a spark igniting tinder. Possibilities surged where walls had existed moments before. For the first time, Joe felt more resolute in himself, the weight of legacy transforming into a calling for progress. Yet beneath that promise also lingered doubt, the reality that leadership would come with strife. Would the others truly rally behind him, or was he still dancing on the edge of resistance? Would this newfound alignment hold? As they began to discuss practical steps moving forward, Joe's sense of purpose grew amid the chatter, but with every hopeful notion also lay the risk of setback. The unknown beckoned, and the true challenge was still ahead, a confrontation with the core values of his very foundation. Joe realized he had unwittingly set the stage for a battle that went beyond irrigation and crops. It was a clash of ideology. His heart raced as he considered the consequences of this awakening. Would he fortify his community's future or fracture long-standing relationships? The air thrummed with anticipation. The changes he envisioned lay at his feet, but the decisions that would emerge next, shaken from tradition's dust, held the power to alter everything. Joe felt the adrenaline course through him as the initial buzz of enthusiasm gathered density in the room. The weight of his decision hung heavy, every ponderous moment tinged with potential. What had begun as a mere pitch had morphed into something electric, deeper than he anticipated. As discussions swirled around him, he caught snippets of conversation that often referred back to his own words. They echoed like a haunting melody, both inspiring and terrifying. Some were excitedly sketching possibilities for rainwater harvesting, others muttered about crops, yields, and the changing climate. Yet, amid the cacophony, Joe's internal landscape churned with anxiety. Would he be strong enough to shepherd them through uncertainties? He pondered how easily comfort breeds stagnation. His upbringing had taught him the value of steadfastness, but now he questioned if that paradigm could confine creativity. Each member of the ranching community had their own long-standing beliefs ingrained as deeply as the roots of their crops. Yet here they were, balancing on a precipice, daring to look over for the first time. The prospect of innovation danced tantalizingly close, yet the fear of the unknown loomed large. Taking a breath, Joe stepped closer to Helen, hoping she would share her insight. With her long-standing experience, she was a crucial player among them. "Do you think there's room in your heart for a small leap of faith?" he asked, a mix of hope and desperation in his voice. Helen's expression softened, and he caught a glimmer of that old mentorship wisdom he had come to cherish. "Change is like the first bite of an unfamiliar dish, Joe. It can't just be good, it needs to resonate with the heart." Listening to her words, Joe felt the weight they carried. He must root everything in a deeper meaning. He couldn't simply ask them to change, he needed to illuminate why it mattered. The legacy of their ranching wasn't just in the soil but in the stewardship of their family stories and aspirations. With newfound focus, Joe gathered his thoughts. What if we begin by addressing the seeds of transformation? Start small. If we can adapt one practice, one method, maybe the rest will follow. His mind raced through possibilities, strategizing how to soberly propose a test run. Watching the expressions shift around him from resistance to contemplation, Joe could almost hear the whispered agreements emerging within their hearts. Yet beneath the excitement loomed an unspoken shadow of doubt. He knew that some members held firm beliefs, rooted in fear more than tradition. Confronting those fears would be essential if there were to be any meaningful development. His gaze shifted to the window, the expansive field stretching beyond, whispering promises of what they could achieve together. And there, in the quiet stretching of dawn on the horizon, a realization settled within him, to challenge not just their way of farming, but their way of thinking about the future. A knock sounded at the door, jolting him back to the moment. It swung open abruptly, revealing Sam, the most influential rancher in their circle, renowned for his commitment to tradition. Joe's pulse quickened. Confronting Sam was inevitable, the real test of his resolve. "Joe," Sam called, his voice deep and authority-laden, "I heard the chatter outside. You really believe in this?" There was no reticence to his tone, a raw need to combat Joe's enthusiasm with the full weight of traditionalism. "More than ever," Joe replied, allowing conviction to thrum in his voice. The tension in the air crackled once more. Sam wouldn't just question the practicalities, but the soul of what Joe sought to change. Even as each heartbeat echoed that conviction, with a resolute glance into Sam's eyes, Joe took a step forward. "I believe we can redefine what it means to be a rancher. Will you help?" Silence fell, and the weight of the moment teetered on fragile uncertainty. It was not just his future at stake. Joe was ready for the reckoning of community ideals versus individual evolution. But just as the room began to stir again, a thought surged through Joe. What if Sam chose to resist? The specter of doubt clouded that urgency, a nagging fear that loomed like a storm on the horizon. The time had come to face the hardest truth of all. The real challenge might lie not in convincing others but in transforming himself into the leader they needed, one ready to embrace the friction of change. Joe's heart raced, the tension in the room palpable. Sam's deep-set gaze bore down on him, a challenge wrapped in silence, as if weighing the very essence of innovation against the steadfast anchor of tradition. Joe understood that this moment could herald either breakthrough or breakdown. Perhaps it was time to shift gears, moving beyond the negotiation and into persuasion. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, he met Sam's eyes with unwavering resolve. "We've all felt the shifts around us. Droughts have changed our crops and our futures. I'm not asking you to abandon what you cherish, Sam. Instead, we can merge tradition with progress." His voice, steady and clear, aimed not just to convince but to connect. Sam raised a brow, skepticism etched across his features. "And how are you going to do that?" "By experimenting with ideals while the earth still needs tilling." His tone was critical, dismissive, and Joe felt the sting of the challenge. He knew that this was not merely a confrontation but a reckoning of values. By starting small, Joe proposed with renewed fervor. "Let us initiate a small-scale rainwater project, just a few barrels at first. If it fails, we adjust. If it succeeds, we'll have a model we can adapt." Joe sensed their attention shifting. Some members seemed intrigued. He could see it in their shifting postures, their half-nods of agreement. Yet Sam's expression remained a fortress of skepticism. "Farming isn't just about science, Joe, it's about faith in the land and time-tested wisdom. You can't force it to change with your well-meaning theories, Sam retorted, his voice unwavering. I'm not here to negate that wisdom, Joe shot back. I respect your experience, but we ignore the data at our peril. The climate doesn't wait for tradition to catch up. He felt a surge of conviction, knowing he was standing on the precipice of something significant, yet, amidst the burgeoning confidence, doubt threatened to seep back in. Could he truly spur this kind of fundamental shift? Perhaps this was the moment he needed to showcase more than mere words. He should embody the change and risk everything for it. What if I led the project myself? He proposed, surprising even himself. I'll implement it, manage everything, and prove it works without asking anyone to commit until it shows results. The challenge stirred in the room. It rang with a sense of audacity that caught even Sam off guard. Silence filled the space. Joe felt the weight of eyes flicking from him to Sam and back, waiting for the verdict. Would Sam see it as reckless bravado or bold initiative? And what if it fails, Joe? Sam shot back, his voice lowering, the challenge still unyielding. Then I bear the consequences, Joe replied, his voice slicing through the tension. But if I fail, it's my failure alone. I'll ensure that our community remains intact, that no one else is affected by it. But I believe in this, and I think deep down, you do too. The air became thick with anticipation, the chamber echoing with the weight of an unspoken agreement or an impending break. The dust motes dancing through the sunlight seemed to whisper magic in the possibility of growth. Finally, Sam's expression softened, albeit imperceptibly. And you're willing to put your reputation on the line? Yes, Joe affirmed, feeling the solemnity of that commitment wrap around him like a cloak. For this land, for our future, I will. Just then, a distant thunder grumbled overhead, as if nature itself weighed in on the gravity of their conversation. Joe could taste the uncertainty, tension, and hope merging in this moment, thick as the heavy, humid air that surrounded them. As he glanced around, he detected slight nods forming. A shift was occurring. Possibility hovered on the edge. Could this be the moment where he transformed not only his own approach but also began to chip away at the steadfast traditionalism that bound them? But as he held his breath, grasping for that tenuous thread of agreement, he felt a fleeting pang of doubt. What if he couldn't carry the burden of this change? The room, charged with potential, felt on the edge of a decision, as Joe realized the stakes were higher than he had anticipated. Was he truly ready for the responsibility that lay ahead? Was he capable of bearing that weight while risking everything he had? The answer danced just beyond his reach, an elusive truth that simmered beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Joe's heart thudded in his chest, anticipation coiling tightly within him like a spring ready to unleash energy. The room wasn't just filled with apprehension, it was crowded with opportunity, and he felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had taken a decisive step, but now the looming specter of doubt challenged him even more fiercely than before. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. Sam's gaze remained fixed on him, deliberative, calculating. Joe wondered if Sam could sense the palpable fear beneath his confident facade. He was venturing into uncharted waters, not just for himself, but for the community he deeply cared for. It wasn't simply about a rainwater harvesting project, it was about establishing a new foundation of collaboration, hope, and resilience that merged the old with the new. As the murmur of conversation began to bubble amongst the other members, Joe realized this was where his leadership would be tested. He leaned into that realization. What did it mean to be a leader in a time of such uncertainty? It meant embracing the risks but also presenting a vision that could inspire others, something that hadn't felt attainable just moments before. Let us give Joe a chance, a younger farmer named Lily spoke up, her voice breaking through the murmur. We've been waiting for change for too long. What's the worst that can happen? The collective air shifted subtly, a breeze of unanticipated support stroking Joe's back. He seized the moment, a spark igniting within him. What if we not only tackle the rainwater project, he posited, but also integrate environmental monitoring into our practices? If we engage in real-time data collection, we'll not only be adapting but also predicting future challenges. It's a stepping stone. The eyes around him widened, some narrowing in skepticism, while others glittered with intrigue. His heart raced, he was tapping into his emerging innovation mindset. Could a new path forged from that very moment be the key to collective progress? Bold words, but are you prepared for the logistics? Sam questioned, his tone demanding. I'll research, I'll consult experts, and I'll seek help, Joe proclaimed. The first step is to commit to the trial. Then, we will assess and pivot as needed. If this community thrives, we thrive together, if it fails, we readjust as a team. The unsettling tremor in his voice echoed his last words, underscoring the burden of the unknown ahead. Despite his nerves, a strange, unforeseen confidence surged within him. This endeavor could not just change farming practices, it could transform how they functioned as a community. Were they together or just individuals battling against the unpredictabilities of nature? This question nagged at him, seeking a resolution. All right, Joe, Sam finally conceded, his eyes boring into him. You get your chance. But if you raise expectations, you'd better have a plan to back it up. A rush of relief washed over Joe, the embarrassment of vulnerability now morphing into tremendous resolve. Sam's agreement felt less like a floor to stand upon and more like the launching pad for the venture of a lifetime. Joe didn't just want to prove his point, he needed to prove to himself he could rise to the challenge, but what lay ahead was tinged with uncertainty. Could he coordinate a project of this magnitude while battling his own internal questions? With the responsibility weighing across his shoulders, Joe felt the pulse of urgency. As everyone began to engage in quieter discussions about the project, he found his thoughts drifting to the steps he needed to take. Scouting suppliers, determining costs, creating a timeline. Each item danced around like fireflies in his mind. But amid it all, he couldn't shake the gnawing concern. What if his plan unraveled when the rains didn't cooperate, or what if the community wasn't ready to embrace a new way forward? His thoughts spiraled, urging him onward. Yet, that self-doubt threatened to loom larger than any challenge he faced. As he glanced at Sam, who was now engaged in conversation with others, Joe couldn't ignore the shadows of uncertainty lingering at the edges of the meeting room. Would he have the strength to face not just the project's potential failure, but the impact of his own beliefs clashing with tradition? The stakes had never been higher, and the clock was ticking. What would be the tipping point that either propelled him to success or snatched victory away? And then it hit him: this was mere introduction. The real test awaited just beyond the horizon of their immediate discussions. With renewed determination, Joe tightened his resolve. He would prepare, anticipate, plan, and rise. But as waves of possibilities crashed around him, a stark question emerged from the depths: what if the change he sought was more profound than adapting ideas, but rather metamorphosing himself in the face of steadfast resistance? As the weeks rolled by, an unexpected rhythm began to blossom across the ranch. Joe Harris dove headfirst into his commitment, research transforming into action. Each day felt like wielding a hammer against the anvil of his past, forging his dreams into a tangible reality. The rainwater harvesting project began as a whisper, but soon the community buzz transformed it into a crescendo of support and skepticism alike. The self-doubt that initially weighed on Joe like a heavy yoke began to lift, replaced by a fierce determination to prove his vision was not just viable but necessary. Glimpses of positivity emerged when Joe began engaging with local agricultural experts and sustainability advocates, whose expertise breathed life into his ideas. Each consultation fortified his resolve, revealing that blending tradition with innovation could yield prosperous outcomes. What had once filled him with fear, the uncertainty of divergence from the status quo, was now a foundation upon which he built his ambitions. It was a metamorphosis that began to radiate beyond mere farming techniques and into the essence of leadership and community. During a particularly poignant community meeting, Joe stood before his neighbors. The chairs were arranged in a more open circle, a subtle shift reflecting his intention of inviting dialogue rather than dictation. He had crafted a succinct presentation that outlined not just the process but the anticipated outcomes from the rainfall project. As he spoke, Joe could see the familiar faces shifting from skepticism to curiosity, and in that moment, he understood the key to authenticity lay not only in presenting his plans but in inviting shared ownership of the ideas. "I know change doesn't come easy," he acknowledged. "Each of us here has been shaped by our connection to this land and our way of doing things. But by opening ourselves to new ideas, we honor the legacy we've built and the future we want our children to inherit." There was a collective gasp, and for the first time, Joe noticed a brightening of the eyes around him, a spark of hope igniting where once there was hesitation. Feedback flowed back to him, questions arose, and Joe embraced that interaction, seizing it as an opportunity to deepen understanding. Every inquiry sharpened his message, each challenge pushed him to clarify and solidify his vision further. In these moments, he realized the essence of transformation was not merely to impose change but to foster an environment where all voices were heard, creating shared investment in what came next. By emphasizing collaboration, community engagement, and respect for the traditions that still held a valuable place, Joe safeguarded the bonds woven tightly over generations. Weeks turned into months, and the first signs of success began to show. The rainwater project took shape, each barrel strategically placed to harness precious water, creating not just a method but a renewal of spirits. Community members began volunteering, witnessing firsthand the collective effort that bound them deeper than tradition ever could. When water flowed into the first barrel, cheers erupted, echoing like a revival in a place that had long relied on fading practices. It was this moment of triumph that solidified Joe's transformation. Integrating innovation not only preserved their heritage but blossomed it into something strikingly relevant. The overwhelming sense of fulfillment surged in Joe, his heart swelling with pride as he watched his own children get involved, animatedly noting the progress, and absorbing the lesson of adaptability. What once haunted him, the potential discord his choices could invoke, morphed into a sense of unity. It was a bridge spanning from the rigidity of old ways to the dynamic potential of new practices, a tangible testament that real growth sprang from the courage to evolve while honoring what had always come before. By the end of the project, Joe found himself at another community meeting, this time with gratitude in the air. Each participant shared their experiences, the barriers they'd crossed and the trust now established within them. A moment of stillness enveloped the room as Mike, his erstwhile doubting friend, stood up, his voice resonating a new acceptance. "I was wrong, Joe. Change doesn't negate our legacy, it enriches it. Thank you for leading us here." And in that moment of recognition, Joe proved not just to the community but to himself that he was capable of evolving into a leader who navigated transformation with utmost respect for tradition. As Joe reflected on his journey, he embraced the truth: growth was not linear, nor devoid of struggle. It was a tapestry woven with moments of doubt interlaced with courage, clarity intertwined with vulnerability. Standing now behind the barn, watching the sunset paint the land in vivid hues of orange and purple, a family home finally coherent with all he had envisioned, he felt emboldened, the torchbearer of progress forged through understanding. With a fulfilled heart and solid confidence, Joe reveled in the profound victories of both character and endeavor. He had conquered not only the challenge of marrying past and present, but had earned the commitment and respect of a community ready to forge a future together, one barrel at a time. Now it's your turn to join this journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, comment your reactions and theories about the ending, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.